I'm doing fine as a writer now, but when I was finishing high school and just starting out, my mentor told me that I shouldn't pursue a writing career because, in his view, I didn't have a natural feel for language. Basically, he was saying that I lacked the talent. I thought I knew better, of course, and I didn't listen to him. I still pursued a career in writing. And I found my way in literary nonfiction and published my first book when I was 27. And since then worked on many more as a ghostwriter and editor. I think it's fair to say that I proved him wrong. But still, strangely, I suspect that he was actually right, in some sense. Because I didn't have the talent initially. I just worked hard trying to figure out how to write well. And when I look back at my career, I think that the turning point for me was discovering one rule early on which helped me improve my writing tremendously over the years. Just one rule, which made a huge difference, even for a mediocre writer like me. So today, I want to share it with you, since I think this rule is universal and works across the board, no matter what you're actually writing, simple blog posts, genre fiction, or literary novels. Maybe it will help you as well. I'll explain how and why I developed this rule for myself and why I think it works so well. We'll also take a look at some examples, trying to examine how other writers apply it, deliberately or maybe subconsciously. Finally, since this is a channel about writing, serious writing in the age of AI, we'll investigate if LLMs can lend us a hand here. But before we start, just a quick disclaimer, I don't want to oversell anything here. The internet, including YouTube, is filled with people trying to sell you simple solutions to complex problems. It's very annoying. I don't want to be one of them. Yes, the rule is simple. Yes, it made a big difference for me and might have the same effect on you. But writing is a complex craft, all right? It's like meditation. Easy to understand and quite accessible for everyone, right? But you still get results only through practice. And the more you practice, the better you become. My writing rule is kind of the same. It's easy to understand, but you have to practice it. With practice, you get results. You won't get results by thinking about it or listening to me or by applying it even once. You have to embrace it and just start doing it. Also, writing and art in general are as infinite as the universe or our mind. There are many writers who would say this rule is stupid or just not for them. So take it as it is. It's my rule. I think it helped me. I'd be happy if it helped you, but nothing more. By the way, if you have any rules that you've developed to improve your writing, please share them in the comments. It will be really instructive and helpful to learn them, not just for me, but for other viewers as well. Okay, with this out of the way, let me walk you through my initial thinking. When I started, I was writing for magazines, and there were around 10 feature stories in the magazine I was working for. And I thought a lot about how readers consumed every issue, and it was clear to me that nobody read the entire magazine. So I asked myself, what could I do to make the reader choose my story out of all 10? The natural conclusion was that there were 3 critical points: the title, the lead, 1 to 3 sentences summarizing the main idea, and the beginning. These 3 things decided before anything else if a story would be read or skipped. I had little influence over the title and the lead because it was essentially decided by the editors, but as a writer, I knew that the beginning of the story was my responsibility, and I realized that I needed to make it really compelling. And the most crucial part was to nail the first sentence, the very first sentence. It had to catch the attention right away, because if you don't hook the reader right away, you will lose them. People's attention span, I thought back then, is so limited. Poor naive me, I couldn't even imagine back then what would happen to us when social media took off. But you might say, Max, are you kidding? Is this your grand secret rule? Write an engaging beginning? Isn't it like the most obvious thing in the world? Doesn't every writer know it? Well, in German we have a very funny word, jein. It's a combination of ja, yes, and nein, no. Jein. Yes and no. And this is what I'd say to this. Jein. Yes, most writers understand that the beginning should be interesting, gripping, punchy, engaging, intriguing. But many writers give themselves a lot of leeway letting the story develop and become gripping, punchy, engaging, intriguing at some point. What I decided for myself was to frame it much more rigorously. So the rule I set for myself was the following. The very first sentence, up to the first stop, the first period, must be so captivating that it will make it impossible to stop and not read the second sentence. So, burying the interesting bit in the middle of the paragraph or even in the second or third sentence won't cut it. Building up momentum and waiting for the reader to catch up won't cut it. It was a really high bar since I was writing for a business magazine back then, and business isn't a topic where you find lots of suspense naturally. I had to think really hard, trying to find out a single point that would seize the reader's attention right away without any context, because you don't have any space for creating context. You have just one sentence. But I did my best. Sometimes I relied on a fascinating fact, sometimes it was a catchy phrase, sometimes it was an observation, a provocative thought. Once I was writing a story about a marketing campaign launched by some big luxury brand. It was not super exciting and I struggled a lot. But the man in charge said, half-jokingly in the interview, that his friends thought that he had the ultimate bullshit job. Because as a marketing director, he was promoting a brand that was so established and was basically a household name in the category that it didn't actually need any promotion. It was selling itself. He mentioned it in passing, but I started the entire story with that line. I'm paraphrasing here, but it was essentially, most of his friends think that he has the ultimate bullshit job. This might not sound like War and Peace, but you have to understand, for a business magazine back in the day, it sounds really fresh. It was long before the internet, so the usual business writing was very, very stiff. It worked very well. Soon I was the top reporter for this publication. And the more I applied my principle to my writing, the more I noticed that it had an impact extending far beyond the first sentence and even the beginning of a story. First of all, the very practice of finding this first sentence made me think really, really deep about the material, how interesting and original it actually was, and what its main point might be. It often helped me find an angle for the entire piece. Then it helped me think really deeply about what makes a good sentence, because it wasn't just about the facts in the sentence or the action or something tangible like that. It was also about the melody, the rhythm. It was more like working on a poem. When I isolated just one sentence and focused my entire attention on it and gave myself time and permission to write and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite for as long as I needed, I started to write better sentences overall. Then it simplified the writing process and made writing well much easier, because after finding the first sentence, a good one, and all I had to do was to write the second in the same fashion and keep the momentum. Then I had to write the third and just make sure that the reader wouldn't lose interest, that it's still engaging enough. When you start strong, it's easier to continue strong. Essentially, the first sentence becomes the DNA of the entire story. If it's short and punchy, the rest of the piece turns out short and punchy. If it's long and sprawling, the entire piece turns out that way. Finally, it made the job really satisfying. It was often hard to nail the first sentence, all right? But every time I did it, I got a real kick out of it. I knew my editors would have accepted my story without such a strong start. Nobody expected it in every piece, but they sure appreciated it when they saw it. And this feeling that I'd spent so much time finding it, I like telling, remember? So I sometimes spent an hour working just on the first sentence. This realization that I had gone the extra mile for this cool phrase that grabbed attention right away filled me with pride. And I argue that this is the right kind of pride. I felt like a shoemaker doing a proper job, sewing the soul with the right thread. By the way, many years later, I was reading A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. It's a great book where George Saunders explores famous Russian writers like Leo Tolstoy, Chekhov, and Gogol, and tries to learn from them and figure out their method. By the way, a highly recommended book. So I was reading it and came across the description of his own method, and it sounded very similar to what I've been doing my entire life, only put in different words. Here's a quote. "This approach might be called following the voice. An idea for a voice appears, and off you go. You just feel like doing that voice. When I do it, I'm giving almost no thought to anything but sustaining the voice." Yes, he's using different words here, starting with the voice. But I find that the spirit is the same. You start not with some plan, an outline, a message you want to convey. You start with finding a start, something that fascinated you. In his case, it's the voice, and you then build on it. Follow where it leads you. And this is, by the way, the beauty of this method. It transcends genres and writing styles and personal preferences. What you think is compelling and engaging for the first sentence might not be the same for me, and vice versa. I might not appreciate it, but your reader will, as long as you yourself appreciate it. The main point is that it's not buried in the third paragraph, that it's right there in the very first sentence, not even in the second. You do your thing right away, before the first stop. And ways of achieving this are endless. Sometimes it's, yes, just a fact stated bluntly. Sometimes it's action. Sometimes this power of the first sentence comes from its rhythm, or just something odd that you can't even point to. Remember how Slaughterhouse-Five begins. It's one of the greatest books of the 20th century, in my humble opinion, and it starts with a very, very simple sentence. All this happened, more or less. This more or less makes it very odd and intriguing from the very start and pulls me in immediately, and it's the perfect DNA for a book about World War II with aliens in it and time travel. When I graduated writing books, I took my writing principle with me, and I realized that it translates to every medium. Obviously, it works for social media, where clickbait has become a real problem, but that's another story. But it also absolutely translates to books, because maybe in a slightly more subtle way, just as with articles, you can strive to find the right first sentence for your entire book, for every chapter in the book, and even for every section within the chapter. So I kept using my rule, and it served me well. And as I was reading other writers, I started to pay attention to how they begin their stories. And I started to see clearly that some, including the most established ones, didn't bother with their first sentences that much. They clearly wanted the reader to work before they reached something engaging. But some of them obviously crafted their first sentences with great care. And when I spotted it, it felt like I had met a soulmate. I became a bit biased, I guess, about it. Because when I started editing, I often saw other writers missing opportunities to engage the reader when they buried their potentially great first sentences somewhere at the end of the paragraph or in the middle of the page. This happens all the time. And I always tried, and I still do, to convince them to rework it so that this great sentence they have goes first. I want to read from this collection of the best short stories from 2025, most American stories. I picked it up in my local bookstore in Berlin. All stories are great and compelling and thought-provoking in their own way. I enjoyed reading it, but there is one that really stood out for me. And not surprisingly, it has a great first sentence I want to quote here. The story is The Arrow by Gina Chung. It starts like this. You, staring at the stick balanced precariously on the edge of your bathroom sink and praying, "Please God, I'll do anything." But you can think of what to say after that, what to offer that might be a fair trade for not being pregnant. I love it. The energy, the rhythm, and how much it's packed in just one breath, one sentence, how the crux of it arrives with the very last word. And it starts like this, already gives you a hint that the test would probably be positive and your whole word will be appended. And even this "you" used here becomes the point of view of the entire piece. So just for contrast, let's look at a different story. The Pleasure of Working Life by Michael Digler. At the time of the Edmund's death, Gary Minahan had been with the Postal Service for 35 years. You might notice that this isn't as intriguing as the previous example. It's deliberately understated. Yes, someone dies, but there isn't anything intriguing about this death, and the sentence arrives at the fact that the protagonist worked for 35 years at a post office, which isn't something that can blow your mind, is it? So the story is asking the reader for patience. It's a writer's choice, and you can definitely write like this. As I mentioned, even the most established writers couldn't be bothered to be entertaining, at least in the very beginning. The Buried Giant by Katsura Ishiguro. You would have searched a long time for the sort of winding lane or tranquil meadow for which England later became celebrated. Not super exciting, but the book is exceptional. Olive Kitteridge by Elizabeth Strout. For many years, Henry Kitteridge was a pharmacist in the next town over, driving every morning on the snowy roads, on rainy roads, or summertime roads, when the wild raspberries showed their new growth in brambles along the last section of town, before he turned off to where the wider road led to the pharmacy. The melody of the sentence is great, but it's almost boring, right? Snowy roads, rainy roads, or summertime roads make it a bit poetic, but for me it still doesn't move the needle. But I love this book anyway. So this only goes to show that you don't need to follow this rule of mine to become a famous writer or to write great books. But that being said, it helps a lot, especially when you have limited talent like me, for the reasons I described. Let's now take a look at the first sentence of Vonnegut's Welcome to the Monkey House story. So Pete Crocker, the sheriff of Barnstable County, which was the whole of Cape Cod, came into the federal ethical suicide parole in Hyannis one May afternoon, and he told the two 6-foot hostesses there that they weren't to be alarmed, but that a notorious nothing-head named Billy the Poet was believed headed for the Cape. I don't think we need to take it apart and analyze it. It's clear that this is a masterpiece and a masterclass in creating suspense from the very first sentence. As I said, when I read something like that, I feel like I've met a soulmate. That's not to say I'm as brilliant a writer as Kurt Vonnegut, but just as we strive to achieve the same effect, he with his great brilliance and me with the limited ability that I have. And in general, I don't think that every story, every book needs to have such a grand first sentence. Every piece of writing has its own theme, its own register, its own level of complexity and ambition, but still you can find something pulling the reader from the very start, even when it's more of a subtle nudge than a real pull. So have I convinced you? If yes, give it a try. Next time you write something, don't just aim to write a compelling beginning in general. Aim to write a gripping first sentence that will be compelling and intriguing on its own. Stop at the first period and look at the sentence in this isolation and ask yourself, does it work? If not, spend some time rewriting it, experimenting, tweaking, trying different things until it clicks for you. I bet it will make a profound difference. Question is, can AI help us here? Well, since so much depends on the first sentence, since it will be the DNA of our entire story, I'll advise against letting AI write it for you. But it doesn't mean that it can't assist us. If you have some raw material, you can ask an LLM to scan it and find potentially the most intriguing facts or events you can start with. Or you can ask AI directly to generate 10 variations of the beginning, or 20 or 30. When I do it, I always throw away all of them. But there is sometimes an interesting idea that makes me think and pick it up and rewrite it and make my own. Basically, you can brainstorm with AI but craft your own first sentence in the end. This can easily be achieved in a simple chat interface, but when you develop your story further and start self-editing, the best place to do it, in my humble opinion, is icanwrite.app. It's a text editor for writers I've developed myself, so I am a bit biased. It gives you access to all major AI models and has built-in AI tools that don't generate text for you, but help you improve it. Check your text for redundancies, or show don't tell problems, or just grammar. All powered by LLMs. The beauty of it is that you don't need to download or install anything on your machine. It works right in your browser, even without signing in. I would be happy if you gave it a try and let me know what you think of it. But for now, that's all I have. This video is a bit different from what I previously had on the channel, less about AI, more about writing itself. I'm curious if you find it useful and what you think of this type of video in general. I have some more things I could share if you find it not completely useless. So I look forward to reading your comments. And as we say here in Germany, bis nächstes Mal.